Hey guys, let's check out together how we can solve the lists exercise together, okay? So we have several tasks that we need to complete here. The first one is we need to just initialize the state for the to-do list. Then we have to render an empty list. We have to add a to-do list. We have to toggle to-do list, toggle item whether it's completed or not. And then we should be able to delete the item. All right, so let's just start with something that we bumped into during the lecture, is that we do not know actually what's the type of the to-do, and then we can make many spelling mistakes. So let's start with that. So let's just define a type for to-dos. And so it will have exactly these parameters. So we can just brutally copy this and put it in here and then just retype it to proper values of the type. So ID will be number, text will be string, category is a string, and then is completed will be a boolean, right? So that makes our life super simple. So in here, we want to initialize the state for the to-do list. We can use an array of objects, okay? So what we'll do is we create a to-dos and set to-dos as our setter function, and then we use state. We've already imported it here from React. And what we'll do is we initialize it to an empty array. The problem now is that the to-dos is actually declared as any. So what we want to make sure is that the to-dos is properly typed as an array of to-dos. We have two options, as I mentioned in the lecture. We can either type it as this array as an array of to-dos, or the proper way in React actually is to use generics. And you can see that the useState is a generic function that can accept one type parameter. And so what we'll do is we'll add and tell useState actually what type is stored in the state. And in this case, it would be an array of to-dos. Simples. Okay. So let's solve actually problem in which let's prepare just hard code some to-dos so we have a couple of them to play with. So the first one will be ID is 1. Text will be first to-do. Category will be home. And then what's the last thing is completed is, let's say it's false. Now, what we'll do next is just copy this into another to-do. And then we'll just set ID 2. Let's call this second to do. Category will be work. Now let's make this one complete. And see if we, sorry, it's complete these two. Let's see if we can render those correctly before we do anything, okay? So here we have our div where we want to render our to-dos. So what we'll do is we'll actually use an array map function, okay? So something you saw in the lecture. So what we'll do is we'll take our to-dos and then we'll map over those to-dos, okay? Map function takes each and every element of an array, executes a function that we provide, and then returns that value. So in this case, what we want to do, we want to consider each and every element in this array, and then return some JSX, some JSX code that will actually show this to do on the screen. So map function accepts two parameters. The first one will be the to do. We name it to do, and then the second one is an index in that array. Right, so whether it's a first, second, third, fourth, or sixth element, and then in the return it needs to return something. So in this case, let's just return a div with some value. Okay, so in this case, let's just return to do dot, and because it's all nice and typed, let's just return a text just to start with to see something really fast. So when you execute this, we got our first to do and second to do. One thing I want to do is I just want to add a line here, horizontal line, the ruler in this case, which tells me we have first to do and second to do. Let's fix one of the things that happen a lot is that you can usually see this error in your console, is that if you're rendering an array you should always provide a key for each and every element. In this case, you have two options. You can either provide this I element, which is the index of an array, or more safely, since the to-do ID will always be unique, let's just use to-do ID. Please look at the lecture why providing I element, well, the index of an array, is actually not safe in this instance. And the long story short, since we are modifying the contents of this array, there could raise issues where your interface will not be correctly rendered because the indexes will not match to what you're showing. All right, so now it's nice and safe. It looks good. I have my to-do text. Now I want to do a couple things. So we've already prepared some nice styles for you, right? We have an add button style, we have a to-do item style, which somehow renders a couple things. In here, I can see that I have some to do here and completed. And what I want to do is for completed item, I want to add a text decoration to be line through. There we go. So I can remove this to do because I've just completed it. So what I want is I want to mark every to do item with the class name to do item. And if the item is completed, I want to add this extra class called completed. All right. So let's do just that. Okay. So up here, we'll do class name, and then we'll name it to do item, just like in my index.csx. Okay? So to do item. If I run this, now I can see my items rendered correctly. And then what else is more expecting? And then what I want is the item completed. To do item expects two different elements. It's a span element and the button element. So let's just format it like that. So actually my to-do text will be stored in a span. It's a span here. And the button is stored in button. Okay. And let's just add complete here. All right. So if I run this, all right, I'm getting some nice interface. All right. So now let's solve the problem is that I want for all my completed element to render with the strike through thing. So I'll do this, I'll do to do item. And now I need to concatenate. So after the to do item, I need to add some extra. So if it's completed, I want to complete it. If it's not completed, not completed. Okay. If I do concatenation, you can run into issues because now I need to add extra space, this and that. It's always safer to use interpolation. So let's change this to an interpolated string. Okay. So I render to do item, and afterwards in string interpolation, you can use this this notation. And then if I would just use a string here completed, and I run this, every single one of them will be completed. Yeah. So, but I don't want that. I want to say that if to do is completed, I want to add is completed. If it's not, I'll not add anything, right? It's going to be empty. So if I run this, booyah, okay? I got my first to do is complete. Otherwise, it's not complete, okay? The other thing is I want to use this thing, right? So if my to do is completed, I want to name this button completed. Otherwise, I would say not completed. So I can actually see whether this item is completed, yes or no. And we can see it's not completed. Actually, let's do it the other way around. Let's say if the item is not completed, it will make more sense, right? So this item is completed. Boom, I click and it should change to not completed. And this one is actually not completed. So boom, I click on this and it will change to completed, but we haven't implemented this yet. Okay. So let's continue, but we're doing really great, right? So we already have a list, which we are able to render all of our to-dos. So all we need to handle is the event handlers. So let's focus on those. So let's solve first ability to add a new to-do. Okay. So what we'll do here, and you saw this in the lecture. So if we need to set to-dos, and then for now we will add this new to-do item there. Okay. So what we'll do And set to-dos, we mentioned that we need to always return a new array, right? It needs to be a new object reference. So what we'll do is we'll add original to-dos, and then we add this new to-do. Okay, so in this case, we'll just add this hard-coded new to-do. Okay, so if we run this, boom, it did. If we add, yeah, it just is able to add these new to-dos, which is great. All right. So that's all good. Let's save this, and then we refresh this. The problem of this is rendering empty list initially is that if we have no to-dos, like if we look at a test, it's asking us that there should be no, there should be a saying that there are 0 to-dos. Okay, we don't show that. And there should be 0 elements that have a role called list item. So let's fix that. Okay, so let's fix this first now. So let's fix this first test, so at least I have something green to look at. So what we'll do here is we'll add another thing, and we'll say to-dos. So if to-dos dot length is 0, then we say 0 to, I need to make sure that I spell it correctly, to-dos. Okay, so we do that. 0 to-dos. Otherwise, we return anything. Okay, so if we run this, okay, I have some error here. What did I do? To-dos length is 0. It's 0 to-dos. Otherwise, nothing. Okay, so let's run this. And I have an error. Oh yeah, sorry. There's an extra parenthesis here. Okay, so if I run this, ooh, okay, so I am getting a renders with an empty list initially. That's also it's going to fail because we are hard coding these values. Okay, so if we want to start completing this test, we need to get rid of this. Okay, and we already can, because we already tested our functionality for rendering this, so we can do that. So we are rendering empty initially. Yeah, so we get all this. Add a to-do item to the list is still failing, so we look at the test. So we add this list, and the problem here is now that it's trying to find all elements with the role called list item. There should be an item with the text list react, and there should be one. One thing that we didn't do, and that's for accessibility purposes, is that the list item should be marked with a particular role. Okay, so that's for screen readers. So unless you are using a li element, so you're doing ul and li, which I am not, okay, I am using actually a div element, the screen readers wouldn't know that this element is a list element. Okay, and that's where you need to help the screen readers, for example, for people with vision impairment, to say, all right, this is a list item, and this should be a list. Okay, so then the screen reader is able to recognize this. If we run this, we're getting 2 completed tests. Okay, so we've rendered all this correctly. We've added the role correctly because, div is not a list element, but we said to screen reader, hey, you are a screen element. We've correctly added the class names, depending on whether it's completed, yes or no. And we still need to fix the 2 tests. We need to fix the completion of a status and then ability to delete a item from the list. Okay, so let's do that. So the first thing that we're going to fix is the ability to toggle item complete yes or no. Okay, so up here on this button, we add a new onClick handler. And in this case, we're going to reuse this function called toggle complete. And while we're at it, let's actually clone this button, and let's call this delete to do, and then let's just call this let's just name this delete. Okay, delete. Oops, spelling error there. And I think I've seen a spelling error, not completed. There we go. right? So if we run this, we have this completed, we have this delete, and all of that works, okay? The other problem I can see here is that these elements are not spaced correctly. So if we add to do, we can see these spaces, and that's again because of the styling that we've used. And just so you know, in the to do item, we used this justify content space between. So basically all the elements in here are justified by space between. So there's the same amount of space left and right. So what we can easily fix this. We put them in their separate element, which should be a div, and fix them. Boom, done. So if we run this and I have my completed and delete element next to each other beautifully. All right, we're almost there, guys. So stay with me. Now we're going to do a little bit of magic again with the filter and map operator. So let's actually first solve delete. I think that's kind of easier to solve. So what am I doing here is when I click on delete to do, it's accepting this function. It wants an ID, right? If I would just pass this delete to do, it would actually send the parameter, an event parameter of this onClick function. Okay, so this would not be an ID. So what I need to do is I cannot just pass delete to do. I'm going to create a new function here. So it's an array function. And I'm going to pass a to-do.id. Simple as that, right? So it's an array function. So if I click, this function is executed, which calls a delete to do with to do. So this to do.id. Okay. So what we do here, let's just do this console log. And then we just console log the ID here. So if we run this, and then if we add to-dos, and then, oops, if we add to-dos, and then we click on delete, we can see that we are getting the ID in the console, okay? So the last thing that remains is we need to set to-dos. And what do we set in the to-dos? One thing you could think of is just using the splice operator and all of that. None of those values, none of those functions actually produce a new array. So we have actually this beautiful function on an array called filter. So what filter does, it accepts a function as accepts a function with one parameter as its value, and what it does, it returns all the elements that fulfill this that return true for this function, and does not return all the elements that do not fulfill this. For example, if I would want to return all the to-dos that are completed, I would say, okay, I filter the elements for which the to-do is completed. I want to return all the elements for which to-do is not completed. I want to return all the to-dos whose category is home, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, so it's a very powerful function that basically creates a new array whose condition, so for which each the elements of that condition return true. So in this case, if I want to delete a to-do with this ID, return all to-dos whose ID is not the ID that I've provided in this delete to do. All right, simple as that. Look at that. If we run this, and I add a couple to dos. So it's just the tests are running. That's why this is not. But look at this. Delete is completed now because I can now add and delete, add and delete. Amazing, right? And then the last thing I want to see is toggle completion. So for set to dos, what are we going to do again? So right now, what we need to do is we're going to map over the elements. Right? So we're going to, again, we want to create a new array. So I'll show you the long version, okay? So what we'll do is we'll find an index. In to-dos, we do find index of an to-do with this element ID. Okay, so to-do.id. Okay, so now I know which array element has this ID. Now what I can do is I can create a new array by cloning the original array. Okay, so now I have this new reference. Okay, now I have an array that is exactly the same as an array, but it contains a new object reference because I've created a new array. And if I would set the UI would refresh. And all I have to do now is in the new array, in that index position, index, I will spread this original value. So I'll say, so array, to-dos index. So this again is still no change, right? So what I've done here now is I found the index where this to-do lives. I cloned the array into a new array. And so far I haven't changed anything. I just said that on the index position of this new array, just, you know, put the original, put the clone of original item. But what I need to change is this is completed becomes to-dos, index is completed. I just want to flip it, okay? So what I say, so on that position, just clone that element and then say that it's completed, it's not, it's complete. If we run this, what we forgot is we forgot that to-dos, we put this new array. Why did I name it new array? You know, what I can do is I can actually name it new to-dos. New to-dos. Okay. I pressed F2 by the way for a rename. Okay, and if I run this, it should run, and it's not running, so we'll have to figure out what is happening. So if I do complete it, okay, so it is actually doing what it's supposed to. We just need to figure out why it's not completing element with text mark complete. It wants us to find a mark complete. Okay, so not completed and this. So let's find this here and let's call it mark complete. And then let's put it back there. Let's see if this helps. Okay, there we go. So it actually just, we tried to be too fancy, but the test actually expected just this text called mark complete. Okay, and we got everything passing, but I still want us to do this a bit nicer. Okay, so this is a little bit too much work in my opinion, in which, finding the index, cloning the array, then just doing all of this to clone then this element, this and this and that. This can actually, I'll leave it here just in case. But I want to do const new to-dos. And what we'll do is we'll use a map function. Okay, so what we'll do is we map over the elements with to-do. So for every single to-do, what I want to do is I'm going to use a ternary function. So if to-do.id, I'll start with a simple thing. If it's not the ID, so if this is not the element I want to complete, I will return the element. I don't care about what that, I want to just return the same element. I don't want to change it, same object reference, everything. But if it's not a to-do, what I'll do is I will return a new object, and I'll spread the to-do here. So I'll just clone it. Yeah. So I want there to be everything the same as in the original to-do, but is completed becomes not to-do is completed. Right? Look at that. How much code? Very little code. Okay. And if I did everything right, I spent a couple minutes scratching my coconut why this doesn't work. But then I console logged this ID and I found out that it's definitely not the ID that we're after. Then I realized that when I was too hasty, I fixed the delete to do call, but I didn't fix the toggle complete call. So what we need to do is essentially send the completion of to-do.id here. And now if we run this, we get all tests passing, which is great. And let's just check what we've done. So essentially we've done the same thing. I'm just going to remove this console to do, and we can compare how beautiful and short this is, and essentially how a bit more complicated this is. You can actually format it a bit nicer as well if you really want to, so that it's all nice and tidy. Okay, so if we now add to do, we have mark complete. We just had that. Apple more, mark complete, delete, everything works as expected. All right, thank you for watching.